everyone in the UK has them. Some boroughs do, some counties do, most do not. There's an election to the National Assembly. There's no election to the Scots Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, the London Assembly, or indeed Westminster. So elections in the United Kingdom are always on a Thursday. So first Thursday of May is the local elections, but in your borough or county, it'll be 1 year in four. Anyway, so the polls close at 10 o'clock this evening, and according to the opinion polls and indeed the exit polls, it looks like the Conservatives are going to take a drubbing, get about 33% of the vote, Labour roughly 40% of the vote, the Liberal Democrats about 9% of the vote. Now, for the Lib Dems, that's actually a fairly poor result because with Sir Keir Starmer not setting the world ablaze, a competent leader of the opposition, not a fantastic leader of the opposition, with the Conservatives sort of mired in scandal, you'd think that they'd be the Liberal Democrats would do quite well. But Sir Ed Davey is the invisible man, and they've found it easy to criticise the Conservative and Unionist Party, but they haven't laid out their vision. And actually, likewise, Labour hasn't articulated their policies very well, not come up with very attractive policies, really not spelt them out. Now, that's partly because you make yourself a hostage to fortune. If you set out your stall 2.5 years before an election, then you allow the governing party to pick that apart and to critique that and say this wouldn't work and that'll be too expensive and do people really prefer this? So, all right, that is one of the luxuries of opposition, but uh, there is also an advantage in offering an alternative and saying, and that this is how we do it differently. Um, Anyway, so the Green Party looks like they're going to do really well and get 7%. I mean, about their best ever results. So quite a few councillors for them. But remember, obviously, your vote share doesn't necessarily translate into something anything remotely proportionate for councillors. And the Greens' vote is highly localised, more so than Labour or the Conservatives. Obviously, I mean, everybody knows Labour does better in cities, particularly northern English cities, and the Conservatives do best in the English countryside. But there are places where the Greens are huge. Let's say Bristol, Brighton, Oxford, bits of London, particularly strong in London. And there are places in the United Kingdom where the Greens scarcely exist. And almost 90 votes for 90 seats were won unopposed. Only one candidate put forward. I heard there are some local council seats, nobody put his or her name forward. But cut to the chase, Stormont, that's the Northern Ireland Assembly. So it's a racing certainty that Sinn Fein will be the largest party there for the very first time. They've never been the biggest party in Northern Ireland before, nor is any nationalist party. The other main nationalist party there is the SDLP, Social Democratic and Labour Party. So Sinn Féin in Irish means ourselves alone, which is indicative of their xenophobic, indeed Anglophobic attitude, as in they want to sever all ties with Wales, Scotland, and England, with their kith and kin. They want to take Northern Ireland out of the United Kingdom, fuse with the Republic of Ireland, thereby bringing Northern Ireland back into the European Union. So they've got absolutely nothing in common with the English, but they've got everything in common with the Bulgarians and the Estonians and so forth. Anyway, so it's partly by unionist ineptitude. Unionists have got an incredible ability to shoot themselves in the foot, especially at precisely the worst possible moment. So Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, he's a capable leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. He's a seasoned politician. He's quite plausible, well dressed, and so on. He used to seem a little bit out of his depth, somehow immature, a bit dim, but I think he's grown in stature. And the DP had a terrible few years, had gone through three leaders in 1 year. They had one leader who lasted about a fortnight, Edwin Poots. And then there's BT, who's the leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. But the UUP is a shadow of its former self. Remember, it ruled Northern Ireland for half a century. It was still the dominant Unionist Party for almost a further 35 years after that. And then it's been eclipsed by the DUP and never looked back. And remember, Sir Geoffrey actually was a member of the Ulster Unionist Party. He was their MP for Laggard Valley for a while before defecting to the DUP. So, Arlene Foster actually was quite credible. She's well regarded in Westminster. She led that party for quite a long time, but she's gone now. It's partly because people have drifted away from the DUP towards more moderate parties like the Alliance Party, the Ulster Unionist parties undergone a bit of a resurgence, and so on. And even the Green Party's picked up in Northern Ireland. I mean, one of the fascinating things is that the people who don't identify as any religious denomination, that's about 10% of the population. So, the Catholic community is about 40% of the population, the Protestant community about 45% of the population, At least 10% say they've got no religious denomination. There's traditional unionist voice, which is tiny. I think it's insane for unionists to be split. The thing is to amalgamate. Why on earth wasn't this done years ago? This senseless duplication of resources, wasting it fighting each other. And okay, they're a little bit sensible because there are 18 constituencies in Northern Ireland and there are 5 people elected to the assembly for each constituency. So you won't have 5 DUP and 5 UUP going forward. In fact, you almost never have 5 from any one party because getting all 5 seats is virtually impossible the way it works. So there might be 3 from the DUP and 3 from the Ulster Unionist Party would go forward. But why not merge into a single party? There are not significant policy differences between them. I mean, they both dislike the protocol. The other thing I think you need to accept is the protocol's here to stay. Despite it being dissatisfactory, it's better than the alternatives. It could get an awful lot worse. As Lord Butler said, politics is the art of the possible. You have to live with it. I know Westminster talks about unpicking it, but the UK government doesn't really want to rock the boat. Despite its shortcomings, the protocol works. There is a soft border with the Republic of Ireland, therefore with the EU. There is peace in Northern Ireland. It's not a sufficiently good reason to jeopardise that. Now, so Sinn Féin are actually quite circumspect. You think they'd say, we want a border poll right away. I remember about 15 years ago, the then leader of the Ulster Unionist Party, David Trimble, suggested it. So because it would kill the issue for a generation. And back then the Unionists would have won fairly comfortably. Actually, before Brexit, the Unionists would have won very comfortably. A majority of Catholics in Northern Ireland wanted to stay within the UK. That was astonishing. And they'd vote for nationalist parties, the SDLP and Sinn Féin, but most of them, even 23% of Sinn Féin voters, were going to vote to stay within the United Kingdom. But since Brexit, a lot of that's changed. But Sinn Féin are clearly not confident about this. If there was a poll on Northern Ireland's future and Sinn Féin lost, they think, well, that the issue will be gone for a generation, maybe for a century. And they also saw what happened in Scotland to the SNP. And even after Brexit, the SNP, they're not getting a second referendum. They've actually stopped talking about it right now. But it's quite good not to be talking about identity issues, trying to be the best manager of the shop. Think, what can we all agree on? It's about like Michael Oakeshott's his analogy of a ship of state. Do we want to sail to this way or do we want to sail in that direction? We squabble over that, but we all want the ship to stay afloat. There are certain things everybody wants. We all want crime to be down. We all want good healthcare. We'd like public transport to work well, as well as the roads not to have potholes in them. And we'd like a clean environment. We'd like a growing economy. We'd like low inflation. We'd like low unemployment. So let's concentrate on delivering those. Anyway, so there also was a border poll, as Unionists can point to, in 1973, with a 59% turnout. 98% of people voted to stay within Northern Ireland, within the United Kingdom. You might say that's suspiciously high. Yeah, that's because of the fairly low turnout, because nationalists boycotted the poll. But nevertheless, inevitably, there were some Catholics who voted to stay within the United Kingdom. It was an absolute majority, and that was it. And you could say, well, you want a referendum on Northern Ireland's place in the Union, you had it. That's it, settled for all time, can never ever be revisited. And actually, that's the way the European Union would do things. They would hold a referendum. If they got the result they wanted, that was it. It could never ever be redone. It's been decided for all time. But if they lost, obviously, like in the Republic of Ireland over Nice the first time, over Lisbon the first time, well, that didn't count. The people had to be forced to vote again till they got it right. Anyway, back to Great Britain, the Tories are going to take a drubbing, partly because these lockdown scandals, the incessant lying by Boris Johnson, and just generally failing to deliver the anemic economy, the rising inflation, some of which is beyond Westminster's control because it's the world situation, the energy shortage because of the Ukraine war. The Ukraine conflict has allowed Boris to distract attention from that. He's allowed being able to play the world statesman visiting Kiev, these tub-thumping speeches. No wonder Ben Wallace, the defence secretary, is rated the highest of all the cabinet ministers because he's been able to talk about his area of expertise so much. But I've got a friend who works in 10 Downing Street, I'm not about to say who, says Bojo is not even going to face a vote of confidence right now, let alone be booted out by the Conservative and Unionist Party. Anyway, so it's fairly good news for Sir Keir Starmer. It looks like Labour's going to come back in Scotland, be the second party of local government. Will that lead to them getting more Westminster seats next time? I mean, probably. They're at such a low ebb, but it might not be a dramatic improvement. And the SNP is going to do pretty well. They're going to remain the largest party in Caledonia. So they're going to be changes, not dramatic changes. They said it's going to be the Conservatives' worst result for a quarter of a century since the day that Tony Blair became Prime Minister. 2nd of May. Well, I should have done a video about 2nd of May 1997. There are other things I can point out about these local elections. People predict the Conservatives are going to lose up to 800 local council seats. There are about 20,000 councillors in the United Kingdom. About 4,500 were up for election this time, and about 2,000 of those were Conservative held. I don't think the Tories will lose as much as 800. I think it'll be more like 400. So that is a seriously bad result. But I think Nazis want to dump Boris Johnson. Well, thank you very much for watching my video. So please check in the results, see how accurate my forecast was. Toodle pip.